So, Russia, a country that conjures images of, grand history, iconic art, and maybe a legal system that sometimes feels as labyrinthine as the streets of St. Petersburg.
Huh.
Ever wondered if you could spend just one day navigating some of Russia's more, well, unique laws without accidentally becoming a lawbreaker?
Yeah, that's quite a thought experiment.
That's the intriguing puzzle we're tackling today in this deep dive.
And what's fascinating right from the start, I think, is how these regulations, even the strange ones, offer a glimpse into the values and the historical journey of a society.
Totally.
It prompts you to consider why certain rules, the ones that seem a bit peculiar, have actually taken root.
Precisely. And we've got our hands on this really interesting account. It's called A Day Following Russia's Craziest Laws, Can I Survive?
Okay.
Think of it like someone bravely stepping into Moscow, trying to live by five of Russia's most talked about regulations for just one day.
The real-world test, then.
Exactly. So our mission for you today is to pull out the most compelling insights from this experiment. We want to explore, the possible origins of these laws and find out if the reality matches the reputation.
Sort of cutting through the noise.
Yeah, consider this your fast track to being well informed about this fascinating corner of Russian legal culture without needing to wade through like dense legal texts.
Which immediately brings up a crucial point, right? To what extent do these seemingly unusual laws genuinely shape daily life?
Mm,
Are they, actively enforced, or are they more like echoes from the past that are still on the books but maybe not top of mind?
right. Let's jump into our first legal exploration. The law against public swearing. This came in back in 2014.
Yeah.
And it essentially prohibits using obscene language in public spaces, streets, parks, even the media.
And the penalties, are they serious?
They can be, yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking up to 2,500 rubles for individuals, maybe even higher for organizations. The stated intention is to foster a more civil environment, uphold public morals, which definitely suggests a strong element of social conservatism.
Well, looking at it broadly, lots of societies have some rules about public order and, acceptable behavior.
Sure.
What makes the Russian case interesting here is figuring out what exactly counts as obscene.
Yeah.
And how consistently is that applied?
Exactly. That's the tricky part. Our source talks about being in a Moscow cafe and just feeling this constant need to watch their language.
I can imagine. Hyper-aware.
Totally. And here's where it gets really interesting. Obscene isn't just the obvious curse words. Apparently, it can cover slang and maybe phrases that authorities just decide are offensive.
Vague.
Yeah, the author called it navigating a linguistic minefield. They even had this moment, stubbed their toe, almost blurted out an English swear word.
Oh.
And it makes you wonder, would that even count? It just highlights how open to interpretation this law seems.
Yeah, that raises a fundamental question about legal precision, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the potential for subjective judgment.
Mm.
When a law doesn't have clear boundaries, it can lead to uncertainty, maybe even inconsistent enforcement.
Absolutely. And from what we gather, local experience suggests enforcement is, well, a bit sporadic. Often it seems to target more obvious disruptions like rowdy groups or public events.
So less about the accidental slip-up, perhaps.
Probably. So while the law is definitely real and reflects those conservative values, its day-to-day impact might vary quite a bit. The key takeaway for you, I think, is just how broad this law is and the subjective nature of what counts as obscene.
Okay, let's move on to the second one. This idea of having to dress for the weather. Specifically, this notion that it might be illegal to wear shorts in winter.
Right, the shorts and winter law, often linked to colder regions like Siberia.
Yeah, and the supposed aim is public health, right? Preventing frostbite and things like that.
Supposedly, with potential fines or warnings if you're, caught braving a blizzard in shorts.
Sounds dramatic.
Okay, let's unpack this one a bit. Our writer describes being in Moscow. It was a chilly October morning, maybe 5 degrees Celsius. That's 41 Fahrenheit.
Brisk.
Definitely. And they decided against shorts for a grocery run, went with jeans instead. Makes sense. Walking through Red Square, everyone was bundled up coats, scarves. Wearing shorts would have definitely stood out.
It probably felt pretty awful.
Yeah, probably. And the logic, it makes sense in Russia's harsh winters where temperatures can really plummet.
Of course.
No.
The basic wisdom of dressing for severe cold is, well, common sense for most people.
Right.
What's intriguing here is the idea of turning that common sense into an actual legal requirement.
Hmm.
It suggests maybe a kind of paternalistic role for the state,
Like the state looking out for you whether you like it or not.
potentially. A perceived duty to stop citizens from putting themselves at risk through their own clothing choices.
Right, but here's the reality check. Our writer actually asked a local vendor about this supposed law. The vendor just laughed, said something like, nobody checks your pants, but you'd freeze anyway. Ah, okay. So more folklore than law.
That's what it sounds like. It strongly suggests this isn't some strict nationwide ban, but maybe more local legend or perhaps very specific regional rules that got exaggerated.
Got it.
So the key takeaway for you here, wearing shorts in a Russian winter probably won't get you a ticket everywhere, but it's still, not the smartest move for your health.
Makes sense. Okay, number 3, baby names. This one's interesting. In Russia, it seems you can't just name your child anything.
No XA12 then.
Huh. Probably not. There are actual restrictions against using numbers, symbols, or even royal titles like prince or king.
Why is that?
The official reason is to protect kids from potential embarrassment or future bureaucratic headaches.
Okay, that seems somewhat reasonable. Does the source give examples?
It does. A great one from
Yeah.
2008. A couple tried to register their son with a name that looked like, well, computer code, BOCH RVF 260602.
Seriously.
Yeah, and it was rejected, thankfully. If you try something like that, you face legal hurdles until you pick an approved name. Wow. Our writer spoke with a pregnant friend about this.
Yeah, and she explained that Russian naming traditions usually follow cultural norms, often drawing from the Orthodox Christian calendar or Slavic roots.
So forget names like Apple or North, like you see sometimes in the West.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Those likely wouldn't fly. It highlights how legal systems often reflect and reinforce cultural values, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Naming conventions are tied so closely to identity and social acceptance. By setting rules around names, the state is kind of upholding certain cultural and historical norms.
Absolutely. The friend even joked about suggesting Tsar Ivan for the baby. Got a firm no. Royal titles are definitely out. So while this law didn't directly impact our writer's one-day experiment,
Right.
it really underscores this emphasis on tradition and societal norms in Russian naming, and it is a real law. The Civil Registry apparently takes these rules quite seriously. Rejected names sometimes even make the news. So for you listening, it's a fascinating insight into the weight given to naming and its cultural significance there.
Moving on to the fourth law. This one takes us into administration, residence registration.
Ah, the Propiska system, or echoes of it.
Sort of. Both Russian citizens moving within the country and long-term visitors have to register their place of residence with local authorities, usually within 7 days of arriving or moving.
And if you don't?
Fines. Up to 7,000 rubles, potentially. And for foreigners, it could even mean deportation.
Oof. That sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare.
It can be. Our writer imagined being a tourist in a Moscow Airbnb and having to physically go, with the host, to a police station or post office, passport and all, just to register.
Ugh.
The process is described as notoriously complex, long lines, picky officials. You get the picture.
Yeah, dude. Did they talk to anyone about it?
Yes, a local student who called it a holdover from the Soviet era, suggesting it's fundamentally about tracking population movement.
Which makes sense historically.
Exactly. It's a clear example of how historical systems and ideologies can really leave a lasting mark on legal frameworks, even after the political landscape changes. Residence registration was a key tool for population management back then.
Right, so our writer managed to sidestep this one in their experiment, I assume.
Yeah, by hypothetically being pre-registered.
Yeah.
But the hassle is very real for anyone actually moving or staying long-term. So the key takeaway for you is the significant admin burden this represents, and understanding its roots in that Soviet era, focus on state oversight. Okay, finally, law number 5, this intriguing idea of no flashy license plates.
Flashy plates, what does that even mean?
Well, the concept is that in some parts of Russia, driving with overly personalized or, ostentatious plates is supposedly frowned upon legally.
Okay.
Why? The stated aim. Potentially to reduce road rage and distractions. Keep plates uniform, inconspicuous.
Ah, interesting theory.
Yeah, so we're talking potential fines or even having your plate confiscated if it's too decorative, custom design,
Right.
or it has some kind of provocative slogan.
So what was the writer's experience? Did they get a boring plate?
Unsurprisingly, yes. Rented a car in Moscow, got a standard plate, white with black numbers. Very normal.
But it makes you think, right? The rationale. Russia does have a lot of high-end cars.
It does.
Maybe the thinking is that really showy plates could, stir up envy or aggression on the roads.
That could be part of the thinking behind it, yeah. It might connect to broader cultural attitudes about displaying wealth. Some societies are more accepting of overt displays than others.
So is it strictly enforced? What did the locals say?
The rental agent was pretty relaxed about it, suggested enforcement is rare unless a plate is truly outrageous, like a neon plate.
Okay, so maybe not something most people need to worry about.
Probably not. But the potential motivation behind it, maybe promoting social harmony, discouraging excessive displays, offers a little glimpse into possible cultural values.
Right. So the takeaway for you is you probably don't need to fear the license plate police, but sticking to standard might just align with a certain cultural vibe.
So, reflecting on this whole exploration, this day, trying to follow these unusual Russian laws, it's striking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some seem rooted in practical stuff, like dressing for the weather, even if it's more folklore. Others are clearly defined legal rules with real teeth, like the swearing ban or residence registration.
And the enforcement seems all over the place.
Exactly. Very variable.
But when you step back, you do start to see these threads, don't you? The cultural values, the history.
Mm-hmm. The emphasis on order, tradition, that Soviet legacy is definitely there in some cases.
Yeah, and maybe attempts to deal with modern issues too, plus those regional quirks that become legends.
So let's try and bring the key insights together for you, the listener.
Good idea.
We looked at the surprisingly broad definition and subjective nature of the public swearing ban.
Right, that linguistic minefield.
Then there was the mix of common sense and maybe local custom in the no shorts in winter idea.
More practical advice than hard law, it seems.
The strong emphasis on tradition and social norms, clear in the Beatty naming rules.
Definitely reflects cultural values there.
The significant bureaucratic weight and the historical background of residence registration.
That Soviet holdover aspect.
And finally, those possible social reasons behind discouraging flashy license plates, even if it's not heavily enforced.
Avoiding ostentation, maybe.
And when you zoom out even further, you realize that these laws, even the ones that seem a bit, well, weird, they really do reflect deeper things about Russian culture and its history. Laws aren't just rules on paper. They're part of a society's story, aren't they?
That's a great way to put it.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe, for you to ponder.
Okay.
Considering these glimpses into Russia's legal world, what do you think is the right balance for a society between maintaining social order and allowing for individual expression?
That's a big question.
And maybe, what seemingly strange laws might exist in other cultures that could tell us unique things about those societies?
Yeah. It really gives you something to chew on. And hey, if you listening have ever bumped into any truly peculiar laws on your travels or living abroad, we'd actually be really interested to hear about them.
Definitely. Always fascinating.
Feel free to share those stories. Until our next deep dive into the world's fascinating and sometimes unexpected rules and regulations. Stay curious.